Beautiful, aren't they? The soft sheen, the superb gilding, not to mention the centuries of wisdom they contain. I know people who would kill for a collection like this. Yes, diaboli. You'll never see as many books on the subject anywhere else in the world. They're the rarest, the choicest editions in existence. It's taken me a lifetime to assemble them. Only the supreme masterpiece was missing.
Oh, that's charming.
No, don't knock it. It's really good. It's horrific. It makes Stephen King read like Mother Goose, but it's passionate.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to the show. Today we are talking with Will Errickson. Will, how's it going?
It's going great. Excited to be here.
All right. So if you're wondering who this man is, let me explain to you. Let me fix my lighting and then explain it to you. So Will is the creator of the Too Much Horror Fiction blog. He was also the co-author of the 2017 nonfiction essay and art book Paperbacks From Hell, along with Grady Hendrix. He has contributed reviews for magazines such as The Paperback Fanatic, The Pulp Horror Zine, and Realms of Night. Will has also written introductions for some of the Valancourt reprints of the somewhat rare horror books featured and also not featured in Paperbacks From Hell. Books like The Nest, books like The Legacy. We got The Reaping, Bernard Taylor. We got Stage Fright. That one looks amazing. That's one I haven't read. Looks very very rock and roll. Gwen and Green.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. I had to make room, so I had to cut some of them.
Oh, it's fine. There's
yeah. Some of them. And let's see. And you've also done the review or the introduction for the hardcover version of Hellhound. And this was published by Centipede Press, who I think they just do hardcovers, correct?
They do really, really high-end limited edition hardcovers. Yeah. They're really nicely produced. They really are, but they're expensive right out of the gate. But that's what he does. It's terrific.
Yeah, I seen that they just did the Night Train. They just did Night Train this
Okay.
past couple months. Will has also done the introduction for a book that we have just recently reviewed here on the channel, and that is Bad Ronald by Jack Vance. This was reissued by Fathom Press, which, by the way, he just got those in the mail, so they'll be shipping out very soon.
Yep.
And you've also you're not just vintage fiction. You've also written introductions for new anthologies like The Claw Machine, El Mitchell, and The Rack.
Yeah.
Very influenced by Paperbacks From Hell there.
Specifically, yep, that's specifically done. So that's why he asked me. Yeah, and that one has a Stephen King story in there, The Raft, which I hadn't read in many years. You know, I probably read it when I was a teenager and rereading it to write the intro. I was like, man, it's better than I remembered. There's more to it than what you remember.
All right. So there we go. There's your output. Okay, so hello everyone. Everyone there in the comments.
Hey, everybody. I recognize a lot of these people. Hey guys.
Let's see. All right. So I figured we would start with your the background, your background in loving books. Where did it all start? Start from a young age as a kid. Did you read young adults, or is it something you found later on?
Absolutely. Always going to the library. You know, my mom taking us to the library, like a lot of readers. I remember getting the original Dracula hardcover in and reading that as a kid, like very little and like struggling,
I've heard, yeah, I've
to
heard
read it.
I've heard it's a struggle now to
Yeah,
adults.
right. Yeah. No. But it had these cool pictures of Bela Lugosi in there, and I don't think I'd seen the movie yet. I'm talking when I was very little, like kindergarten age, probably. So with books, it started there, and and the various young adult stuff, like Bunnicula, that kind of thing, back in the late 70s, early 80s. But then I also watched all the Universal horror movies, and of course, growing up in the 70s, there's Jaws and Alien and Dawn of the Dead, The Shining, that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of my exposure to horror was fairly typical, the Alien Kenner, doll and stuff like that. It's just that for me, it continued into my teenage years with, when Stephen King, I think it was around Cujo, Pet Sematary, early 80s when I started reading, when I was probably like 12 or 13. Some people start earlier, but I started reading his stuff about 12 or 13. And then the Lovecraft paperbacks with the Michael Whelan cover art from Ballantine, those were coming out then. And there's that mix with like Metallica and Iron Maiden and H.P. Lovecraft and stuff. So like when I was 14, 15, you kind of had these things going together. And so that's where it started, and then has continued to today.
So right from the beginning, it was horror then. It wasn't like you were into science fiction or like fantasy or.
No, it really was very much, horror. I mean, I was a Star Wars fanatic and stuff, but I was horror right away, and it would just, my parents were cool with it, so take me to movies and, never said like, oh, you can't like read that or can't watch that or anything like that. So yeah, I tell my parents now, I'm like, thank you for taking me to see Jaws when I was so little, because it's like the movie of my whole life, and it just had its 50th anniversary and some of my earliest, memories. So I'm kind of like, thanks,
Oh yeah, absolutely. You wouldn't be here if they held you back.
Exactly. And I think kids being scared by that stuff, I think it's healthy in a way for kids to experience those big emotions. I think that's, I think that's fine. That could be good. Let's just go to therapy. Yeah.
All right. So it says on your blog in 1993, you worked in a bookstore called Bookstore in North Carolina. Who made you wear, quote, ties and dress pants like it was fucking church?
Yeah. That was basically a Barnes and Noble in everything but name, and Barnes and Noble eventually bought them. So but what was cool about it was there were a couple other horror fiction fanatics, co-workers, and we would load up the horror section ordering books. And so this is 93, 94. So the Abyss books were still, the Del Abyss books were coming out, that line. And we also we were ordering stuff like Arthur Machen and Algernon Blackwood. We made sure we had like the old classics. So that was a good way of, and that was when I was first looking for Lisa Tuttle's A Nest of Nightmares. And that was when I found out it was completely unavailable in the United States. I remember looking up on Books and Print. So this is like right before the internet. This is like, 93, 94. Mm-hmm. So you look up like on CD-ROM, Books and Print, and finding out it was only available in the United Kingdom. And, 30 years later, I got my name on the reprint, and got to write the intro and talk to Lisa Tuttle. So things come full circle.
That is cool. How did you know about it?
The Nest of Nightmares, it is in the book Horror 100 Best Books that I got it right here. Stephen Jones and Kim Newman. I got this in the early 90s. I think I've got it. Yeah, September 1994. It says in there. And this is, and the thing with this book though, it's great, but it's more British leaning with the editions. Like the Lovecraft that's in here is not an American edition and stuff. But this is a pretty great reference and guide, and this is where I first heard of Lisa Tuttle's A Nest of Nightmares. So this is a good starting point, I think, for paperback horror fans.
Yeah, I'd never even heard of that. That is cool. I love those British editions too. They had their art just killed us. It killed us.
Some of their stuff is almost too much for me. Some of it I find like just just ease up a little bit. You know what I mean? But some of them are fantastic. I don't have a lot of UK books in my collection, but I do have a good few. And but yeah, some of them, man, some of those artists, man, they're way more graphic than the American ones.
Yeah. So let's see. You're in the bookstore. That was pretty cool that you got to control what books were in the store.
Yeah, we were pretty psyched about it. We sort of saw it as like, remember, like I was saying, that it's the inmates in charge of the asylum. And I eventually was fired from that job because I ordered too many books for the sections I was in charge of. And it was a new manager. They had to make a political, showing. So I got axed. I was like 24, I was like, what?
That's hilarious.
And then I got like within 2 weeks, I got the proverbial better paying job at an independent bookstore that's still around in Raleigh, Quail Ridge Books, still there. And they focused on Southern literature. They hated horror. We all would do our staff picks, that booksellers do. And I remember I did a Clive Barker book when I first started working there, and the owner literally sat me down and had to have this discussion with me that was not the kind of books that they promoted, And she knew I read better writers, and she knew that I knew other books and stuff. So I started doing stuff like the stuff they wouldn't know, like Poppy Z. Bright, Kathy Koja, Clark Ashton Smith. I started Shirley Jackson. I started doing stuff like that was not bestseller stuff and stuff that they went under the radar for them.
Right. It's still like borderline literary kind of.
Yeah, which is fine because I like that. I love that stuff as well. But Clive Barker's one of my first horror loves, from the mid 80s. So
that's so funny that it's Clive Barker that they're like, no, not Clive Barker.
Yeah,
like wasn't he big then? I mean, they were making movies out of his books.
Yeah, he was huge. That was 95. So yeah, his stuff, he was still a best-selling author then. Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy that a store would want to do that.
Yeah, they did not like horror at all. That was very snooty. It was a good job as an independent bookstore because it was better money, lots of great benefits, and I got to meet a lot of authors who came in and did book signings. We were famous for our book signings. They still are. They're still there. I think they've moved location. So it was a great bookstore, but as far as someplace for horror, like coworkers, nobody else was into it or anything like that.
Do you think that they, knowing that you work there, do they have a Paperbacks from Hell like thing now? Like
they do. And one of my friends still lives in Raleigh. A few years ago, sent me a picture of the Paperbacks from Hell display that they had with the Valancourt reprints,
right?
And the book. They had an end cap. They had like a little sign and everything. And of course, this is 30 years later. The people that work there probably, they don't know, this is many years ago. But I was like, vindication. I thought that was So yeah, they do have a Paperbacks from Hell section now. So
yeah, I was on the Paperback Warrior. He interviewed Greg Shepard from Stark House, who used to work for Zebra back in the day, and he would go to the bookstores and try to get them to buy these Zebra horror paperbacks, and they were just this is junk, and all I could think of is, I bet if these stores still exist, I know that they all have look at our Paperbacks from Hell display, 100%, dude.
Yep, yeah, it's very vindicating.
All right. So, like I said, this is a live stream with a live chat. So if anyone has questions, just put them in there. Otherwise, we're just going to keep talking. And
I'm happy to answer any kind of questions and chat about not just horror paperbacks, because I also collect some science fiction. I also collect crime, hard-boiled stuff. So my library is like, I'm up about probably 1,300 horror paperbacks, but I have hundreds and hundreds of other genres as well. So
so when do we get a question yet?
Yeah, from Dirty Huggy about dropping my favorite. Huggy. Yeah. Oh, Piercing John Coyne. I I don't know Hide the Children by Victor. I know who Victor Miller is, but I don't know that book. But Peter St. John Coyne, yeah. Let's see. I'm going to go for some. I'll pop in a couple here. I'm going to do some. Obviously, I love the Clive Barker and Stephen King and the Lovecraft and the Ramsey Campbell and all those famous people. But I'm going to do some real lesser known stuff. Let's see. First up, we're going to do The Flesheaters by L.A. Morse. And this is a Frank Frazetta cover, and this is a Cannibal Clan, sort of inspired by the Sawney Beanie, the Cannibal Clan, that Hills Have Eyes, that whole crew that were cannibals. And so this is like a period historic novel, but it is just very graphic about cannibalism. It's about, a cannibal family and how they prey on travelers through the woods and how they've created their own society and how much they hate the regular people, and it's kind of like the Jaws thing. The mayor's like, who's killing all the villagers, well, it's this clan of cannibals. The Sawney Bean, Sawney Bean, exactly. This is still in print, so this is a cool old paperback. I wanted to reprint this through Valancourt, but it's still available. It's still in print, and this guy wrote some crime novels as well. But this, I think, is his only horror novel. So I don't think that this is too hard to find. And if you can't find the vintage paperback, I think you can buy it like on Kindle from Amazon. So it's not a hard one to get. But this is, I never hear anybody talk about. The author's not famous, but man, this book's just a total cannibal banger.
Yeah, I've heard other people talk about that book, and it's on my watch list because my wife really loves cannibals. So I was like,
okay, and it's really smartly written. The dialogue is historically accurate, and it just has interesting things to say about social hierarchy and things like that. Plus, lots of graphic cannibal violence,
Yeah.
And then another, let's see, The Possession of Joel Delaney by Ramona Stewart. She kind of wrote like sort of thrillers. And this is a possession story set in New York City in the late 60s, early 70s. So it's a great period piece I just love that vibe of New York City at that time. Woman's gets involved. There's like a cult and everything in here, but her brother gets possessed. There was a movie made out of this with Shirley MacLaine from the early 70s that is actually quite good. I recommend that too. But
under the same name?
It is the same name, yeah. Let's see. I've got some questions coming up.
Yeah, they're blowing up.
Yeah, okay. If I had a first edition, what's liminal spaces is if I had a first edition hardback book with a boring cover. Did you see? There we go. Yeah. And a paperback with an incredible cover, which we keep. Yeah. I really only collect paperbacks. Hardbacks in back in the day when I was younger, I collected hardbacks, but I sold those off as a broke college student. So I'm pretty much paperback only. So even if a paperback has a boring cover, I'm probably just going to have the paperback. That is my thing. That's how my shelves are arranged. That's what they're made for. It's a mass market paperback. So paperback always. Have I read or collected any Manly Wade Wellman? I have read some of his short stories and some of the horror anthologies. He had Silver John the Balladeer, which Valancourt just reprinted, which are sort of folklore, fantasy, horror tales. So I don't think I have any of his books. I don't have any of his books alone. So it was all paperbacks from the 80s, I think, are really sought after. And Valancourt just reprinted them. So yeah, I've read them, I've liked them, but I have not collected any of his books.
Wait, they reprinted the full lengths?
They reprinted the collection of short stories.
Yeah, the John the Balladeer. Yeah, I just got that.
Yeah.
Jeff just sent it to me.
Yep. So somebody asked if I have written any horror fiction yourself. You think I would, and I kind of have. I have not. I think about it sometimes to do it for fun, to write like a Ramsey Campbell style story or Clive Barker style story. I did when I was a teenager in high school and won some literary awards, some just like Lovecraft style stuff. But no, I have not really written fiction. Just sort of see myself as a critic, essayist kind of thing.
Hold on, there's a question we missed that he asked in the group, and I wanted to make sure to highlight
Yeah.
it. Okay. Do you know the answer to that?
Yeah. And then there's another question about favorite horror novel translated into English, and I want to make sure I address that because I actually pulled one out here.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, there's lots made as movies. Just right off the top of my head, I'm gonna say Pin by Andrew Niederman was made into a movie in the late 80s, which I think is a perfect Paperbacks from Hell. And I think it was quite a good movie, very Cronenberg, chilly vibe.
Mm-hmm.
But not as many of these vintage horror paperbacks got made into movies as you would think, which is unfortunate. But let's see. So the translated into English, I'm going to say people probably know this movie, but The Tenant by Roland Topper. Roman Polanski famously made this into a movie with Isabella Gianni in the mid 70s. Really super creepy movie. This is the movie Tyne edition. I'd love to find the original paperback from the 60s, but this is like a sort of a European existential identity, personality crisis kind of thing. And it's just very slow and creepy and just brilliantly written. When I was younger, I read all the like Russian novels and all that kind of European existential fiction. So when I came around to this some years back, I knew exactly what I was getting into. So probably this would be my favorite translated into English, The Tenant. I see, do I ever get rid of any books?
Oh, that's say the name. There's so many questions. They're like, who asked the question?
I can't. It just disappeared. But somebody's asking if I get rid of books. No, my collection's always growing. The only time I get rid of books is if I have duplicates. I will sell some on eBay. I have done that, not recently, but I have done that. And anytime I go on vacation, and I'm talking when I go to, like, I found Paperbacks from Hell I found them in Greece. I found them in Paris. I found them in Iceland. Like, we were in Reykjavik some years back, and I found and there was an English language section. So you can find these books everywhere, like literally everywhere.
Have you ever found them, the books in the language of the country you're in, like a Greek version of a Paperback from Hell?
I remember seeing foreign editions of Jaws, but when we were in mostly it was English. Mostly it's mostly in Europe. It's the UK versions, not the American ones. But yeah, I found some cool stuff. Yeah, all over the world. I see Secret Fire Books ask me about extreme horror. I can go either way on extreme horror. My taste for horror run all over the place, in movies as well, so I like some extreme horror, some I don't, just like some quiet horror I like and some I don't. So I don't have a specific opinion on the different aspects. I have my favorites and things like that, but I feel like, I like splatterpunk when it was happening. And some of that stuff holds up and some of it doesn't, just like anything, just like anything else. Yeah. Stu asked about T.E.D. Klein, the ceremonies.
Yeah.
That is a great question. Any idea of how he's going along with his finished second novel? I know he did an interview a few years ago. I don't remember with who, but nobody had heard from him for years. So as far as I know, this is just one of those books I don't think we're ever going to see. It's kind of like Clive Barker still has to write the third book in the art series after Everville. I don't think we're ever going to see it. That said, that Harlan Ellison Last Dangerous Visions was recently published. So never say never. Somebody's asking me where I got my glasses. That is a great. I really do appreciate that question, because I got these recently, and it's it's like Cathedral Eye Care here in Portland, in St. John's in North Portland, and they have like a blue sort of prismatic thing going on. Like, as good as you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy with these. Thanks for noticing.
Oh,
that's a good one. That is a good one. boy, I have to think about that. I guess what is man, I don't know.
I would say start with what is your favorite horror subgenre?
I like I am done with horror novels with kids in them. I'm done with horror novels with cops. I'm done with horror like even small town stuff sometimes. I don't know. I like sort of one thing is like the doom narrator, the academic, you know, the Lovecraftian guy who suddenly finds out all these secrets, and I feel like you can sort of use that in different aspects of or subgenres of horror, you know. So the sort of slowly sort of going mad kind of narrator, or even just one with, you know, with like lots of people in a city like The Tribe by Barry Wood, which is about the golem, but it's also a book that it's horror, but it has all these elements of like of a New York City thriller or something, you know, and there's a lot going on with the characters that are living their everyday life in this city, you know, and the mix of different types of characters and different social strata, things like that. So I like those kinds, you know. I like Clive Barker's short stories that are just still, even after all these years later. I mean, where did he come up with that stuff? You know, stuff like, and then Thomas Tessier writes like really great psychological horror, you know. So I love a good, you know, twisty psychological kind of thriller thing.
What about when it's like, go ahead.
What's that?
I was gonna say, what about like if it crosses genres, like a science fiction horror? Is that more appealing to you after reading so much basic of standard horror?
Yeah, I guess really what I look for is really more like vibe. And for science fiction horror, I would recommend George R.R. Martin's Sand Kings. It's a novella, maybe long short story. That's a fantastic science fiction horror. I see somebody here says, do I recommend any folk horror? Well, the big one is Harvest Home by Thomas Tryon from the early 70s. That is pretty much one of the originals, I feel, of folk horror, and it was made into a TV movie in the 70s. So definitely that. Ramsey Campbell's Ancient Images is a terrific folk horror novel. That came out in '89, and I've reviewed it on Too Much Horror Fiction. So those are two, off the top of my head, great folk horror novels. Somebody says, I love police procedural horror novels. And I pulled one out here, got a stack. I tell you, By Reason of Insanity by Shane Stevens. This is a powerhouse. I mean, this is just nuts. It is one of the first serial killer thrillers. It's from like the late 70s. And it is just like gritty and grimy, and just every character is just pissed and just and you can just feel it. And it is twisty and turny. And this is amazing. What bookshop did you work at when I lived in Raleigh? There was Quail Ridge Books, which is still there. I don't know if they're still. It might be. It's Quail. Yeah, it's Quail Ridge Books. So you Google it, they'll come up, but they're not in the same location. I like this. It's Salem's Lot, Stephen King's best novel ever. Then somebody else says Tommyknockers is my favorite. That's crazy, because Tommyknockers is, I will say, when I started to be done with Stephen King. I got it new when it came out, and it did not do it for me. Salem's Lot is one of the, for me, that's like not just, I don't know if it's his best, but it's one of my favorite books ever. Just a vibe. It was maybe the first or second Stephen King novel I read, so it just lives in my head. Yeah, so definitely say it is one of Stephen King's best books. I would say that. When
were you done with them?
So Tommyknockers, I was like, and then Dark Half. I like Dark Half okay. When I was really done was 4 Past Midnight. I was just done. And I really honestly have not, I've read some short stories by him over the years, but I have not read anything new by King since then. You know, it's just sort of I love his old stuff, and I reread his old stuff, but I sort of describe it as like he's like a cool old relative you think of fondly, but you don't really see too much anymore. Let's see, any Holy Grail books that I don't have. God, I'm gonna probably draw a blank here. Yeah, let me look and see here.
You got a spreadsheet?
I
got an
do.
Excel
I do.
spreadsheet?
I just in Excel, and I keep track of all the books and the condition and stuff. But God, Holy Grail is such a. There's shoot. I'm gonna have to come back to that because I have a list of books. Probably still some. There's still a couple of Lovecrafts that I need. Some of the paperbacks from the early 70s. As I've got a whole shelf of Lovecraft stuff, but there's still a couple that elude me. Sure, if I want to drop $50 or something, I like to find them for cheap.
Are they the Panther editions?
Yeah, they're with the Ian Miller cover art. I love those. I've got one of them.
Good.
They look like Ralph Steadman. What's the best ever bookstore you've run across for picking up vintage horror fiction? Actually back in the day in Raleigh, there's a bookstore called Reader's Corner. It's on Hillsborough Street near NC State campus, and it is still there. And I will see people who are visiting there posting on Instagram like what I got. So for whatever reason, they have a great horror fiction section. I know I got a lot of Philip K. Dick paperbacks from back in the day, like the original Do Android Stream of Electric Sheep for like $6. That is like one of the stars of my paperback collection. There was a bookstore in was it St. Paul, Minnesota, when we were driving across country, moving from North Carolina to Portland about over 10 years ago. Fortunately, it was Patton's Bookstore. I don't even know why I say this because they're not there anymore. They did close, but they had the best horror paperback section I've ever seen, and everything was mint, and everything was like within $5 or $10. And I must have bought $50. It's the kind of thing where the bookseller's like, "Oh, I'm giving you a discount because I spent like $150 there."
This was in 2015.
Yeah, that was about then. Yeah, and in this place is still there. Utah Book and Magazine in Salt Lake City that was where I found The Nest, the one of the most popular Paperbacks from Hell reprints from Valancourt, and they had that was like a great junky old bookstore. So Utah Book and Magazine, I would recommend too.
Other than used bookstores, where do you recommend looking for these
library sales? Library sales is where I have I've had the best luck. The Wake County library sales, both that was in Raleigh. I lived in Raleigh for 20 years. I went to school there and stuff. So and I was living there when I started the blog. So these library sales, they're books that had never been put into circulation. And so I found Let's Go Play at the Adams, Mendel Johnson, $1. I found Jack Ketchum's Off Season, $1. Found the whole Charles Grant Shadow series and the Whisper series, all for $1 each, all completely mint because they'd been in storage. So library sales in your town, estate sales, even just garage sales, even the free little libraries. I found the British edition of Interview with the Vampire just the other day. So a lot of times used bookstores sometimes aren't even, don't even have a horror section. It's not even worth it. I can walk into a bookstore and go, there's no vibe here. They don't have what I'm looking for. There's a place on the Oregon coast, Bob's Books, Robert's Bookshop, amazing paperback horror section. Although I think I cleaned them out a few years ago. Somebody, I think Susanna asked, what is the best adaptation of a horror novel? It's, there's many, but it's Rosemary's Baby. It's Rosemary's Baby. It's it's almost word for word. I don't know if you've read the book or, and seen and compared the movie. It is almost word for word. And it just looks great. It has the right atmosphere. Mia Farrow, John Cassavetes, everybody is fantastic in it. And it's all right from Ira Levin's novel. So yeah, Rosemary's Baby.
That's awesome. I've only seen the movie. I did read Stir of Echoes, the Richard Matheson horror book, and compared it to the movie, and it was pretty similar too.
Okay.
I was surprised.
Somebody's asking, Dirty Huggy's asking if I have Playboy Press paperbacks. And I don't know the book they're talking about, but I do have Playboy Press paperbacks. The ones I like. These guys. These are weird erotic mind control books with just these spectacular covers you would only get from Playboy. So yeah, they did good stuff. These are weird books. So yeah, on the Playboy paperbacks.
Speaking of Richard Matheson, he had a Playboy Press paperback, but he did it under a pseudonym because they had changed it so much that he hated it.
Yeah,
that he was like, "Don't put my name on it."
That's pretty standard. That happens. Somebody says, "Have Toxic Waste?" That says, "Have any obscure writers responded to any of your book reviews?" Yeah. I've had obscure writers and not obscure writers. I've had people. More common is people who knew the writer, like the writer is passed, and somebody's like, I was just looking at my old friend so and so. Actually, one of them was this Joyride. And this is a slasher novel, and this is pretty sought after now. But what's cool about it is the cover happens in the book. You see the severed head and the statue in the cemetery. That's awesome. And the person commented was like, "I was friends with this person. I think this was a pen name. Can't remember the actual name, but they were like, I was just looking at my old friend, and I found this review, and they're like." I remember when he was writing this, or like he just sort of did it as a lark. He like worked in publishing or something, and they're like, "Thanks for the memory of this old friend." So stuff like that, like is really pretty. Had people who've been like, "Oh, that's my dad," or "That was my mom," or something like that, which is really cool. So, and I got an email from John Klein. We mentioned John Klein earlier, and I'd reviewed. This was some years back, and I'd reviewed The Searing, and I did not like it at all. And it was just this hacky hodgepodge of ESP and aliens and female liberation and Carl Sagan's cosmos. It was just junk, right? And I wrote in my review that it was just hacky, junk of whatever was on the bestseller list at the time. And a while later, I got an email from John Coyne, and it was one of those things where they just write, how some old people just write the whole email in the header,
Yeah.
He's like, "Hey, I read your review of my book. You're absolutely correct."
Oh, wow. I thought he was going to give it to you.
No, that was all he said. He was like, "You're absolutely correct." It was just a hodgepodge of what was on the bestseller lists. So yeah.
That's hilarious. The first time I saw your blog, I was looking up this book. I think it was called Sleep or something like that. And it has the cover of the guy laying in bed and all the demons.
Yeah.
And so I go, and you're like talking about how bad the cover is, and then I go down to the comments, and the author is like, "That's my book." I cried when I saw them.
She said that was the paperback cover. She saw it, but what I found out, she had designed the hardcover dust jacket, which is so rare that an author designs their own book cover. That's so maybe that also stung, but that was a great comment. Yeah. The author, Michael Blumline, who died recently, who Grady got to know pretty well when he was writing, when he was doing writing Paperbacks from Hell and interviewing different writers. His short story collection, Brains of Rats, is from 89, 90. These are stories he was writing in the 80s. And these are kind of science fiction horror, very David Cronenberg style. Absolutely essential. I love this book. And he told Grady that he was horrified that his stuff was marketed as horror, and his mom almost cried when she saw like his books and the lurid cover art they were getting, because he thought he was writing like literary, like J.G. Ballard kind of stuff. And then they put some lurid covers on there, and this is in Paperbacks from Hell. Grady wrote about this, that like it kind of soured him on writing for many years. So, man, right?
Yeah, that sucks.
Let's see. Okay. Yeah. Bucky Bus mentions that just read XY by Blumline. And yeah, I read that when it came out. So I don't recall much of it, but it was XY that upset his family. It was almost like he was ashamed to like he knew the book inside was different than the cover, but I guess he couldn't convince his family of that. I guess. I mean, it's just kind of sad. But yeah, that's just a weird thing about being a horror writer. People, as much as people love horror, people hate horror. People look down on it.
They want it.
it is just the most bastard genre. It really, really is. And it's just, and that's why it's, to me, it's like punk rock and metal. It's just like everybody loves it, but the people who hate it, and they'll never get it. And they're a bunch of squares. So fuck them,
Yeah, exactly. They do it in other genres too, like the crime genres and stuff. Those people, there's some authors that are like, no, I'm not in this crime genre. Like this is literature. You're just like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Own it. Love it. Own it. Own it.
Love it. Own it. Yep.
So hold on. So let's go back to you're working at the store into the 90s. And then you start the blog in 2010.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started the blog because there were so many horror film blogs, and I had been doing sort of a 70s movie blog and 70s like punk rock albums and stuff, just stuff I was into. And, I had recently started getting paperbacks again. And I was like, man, people talk about, science fiction. They talk about pulp fiction. They talk about, erotic, adult paperbacks from the 60s and 70s. I was like, but nobody's doing straight horror. There were a couple reviews, but nobody was consistently reviewing only horror. And anyway, that was my impetus. So I just started scanning the book covers and writing the reviews, and it was sort of let's recapture, let's see if this stuff still holds up. And I started reading writers that I had ignored back in the day, like Michael McDowell. Stuff is fantastic. So it just kept going, and I got a fan base pretty quickly. People were like, this is great. I've been looking for this. And here we are years later.
Did
somebody says that I'm not answering their questions? Just a dog says, did I miss the questions? There's a lot of questions here. They're going up pretty fast. So so I do want to answer the questions, but but they're scrolling fast here. So if you've got a specific question, I might have just missed it. I'm not trying to ignore anybody. But yeah, so that was how Grady got in touch with me. Like in 2014, through Reddit, the horror lit on Reddit, and said he had found the blog, and wanted me to write some articles with him for Tor.com, and just to do, we were talking about, forgotten 80s horror paperbacks. So we started doing that. We did a few series of that, and I wrote about like The Exorcist. I wrote about David J. Scow. I wrote about Kathy Koja, Dennis Etchison, and Grady did his. We sort of alternated week to week, and and anyway, so it went. So then a couple years later, Grady calls me up, and he's like, "My publisher thinks we can do a whole book on this this series of essays that you guys have been writing." And he was like, I need your help to do this. I know you have books I don't. I know you know a lot of the stuff. So that was how Paperbacks from Hell started.
So I had a question about the blog, and I thought it was named after something else.
Yeah.
I don't think it is, but I thought that you had been inspired by Shannon Wheeler's Too Much Coffee Man. And I thought it was a play on Too Much Coffee Man.
Okay. No, it comes from the Misfits' Too Much Horror Business, which is from the old Chuck Berry song, Too Much Monkey Business. And then Johnny Thunders did Too Much Junkie Business. So it was just in that vein, people that Chuck Berry, Johnny Thunders, Glenn Danzig, I love them. So
okay, that's good.
Yeah, just a dog. Do I love you? Yes, I love you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
There you go. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Johnny Thunder did a great version of that song, Do You Love Me? The song from Dirty Dancing. That's a great cover Johnny Thunders did. Pretty in Paper Cuts is how do we choose what to include? That's a great question, because we had so many. I scanned hundreds and hundreds of my book covers, and a lot of them didn't end up in there. We didn't do any of the vintage Stephen King. I wanted like Salem's Lot, which is like a black cover, that little bit of blood, or the original Carrie. Neither of those books have his name on there. which I thought was really cool. But we just what we thought had the best covers, regardless of what the book inside was like. You know, we wanted to showcase how crazy these book covers were, and then also books that we loved that we wanted to talk about that were lesser known. That's why people ask, like, why wasn't there more Stephen King in there? Why wasn't there more Peter Straub? Wasn't there more Clive Barker? Well, we feel like everybody already knew that stuff. You know, that was the kind of thing. So we wanted to highlight lesser known authors. We wanted to highlight one off, you know, people just wrote one book like Mendel Johnson, Let's Go Play at the Adams, stuff that was important to the genre, like The Other, Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, Burnt Offerings. Those are like the four horsemen of the apocalypse of the horror fiction early era that got on the bestseller list and made publishers, marketing departments realize, oh, there's a lot of money in this, you know. And that was all just a couple years before Stephen King, and then it took off. So that's how we chose. It was all those different reasons: good cover, good book, forgotten book, and historic, you know, kind of historic books too. Let's see.
We made into all of them.
Oh boy. Yeah, I would say people are talking about Kathy Koja. Like Kathy Koja's The Cipher would make a really creepy movie. Joe Lansdale's The Night Runners would be a really badass, like gritty thriller. His stuff reads like Sam Peckinpah movies from the 70s. So I think those two things would be solid movies. So somebody's Open Wounds asking, do I dip into small press zines like Death Realm? I have some. I don't have any Death Realm, and I've looked into buying them, you know, looking on eBay and stuff. I remember all those magazines back in the day. There was Night Cry from the people that put out Twilight Zone magazine. I have a few of those, but there's so much. There's the Whispers magazine, but I have not really dipped into. I'm aware of them and the writers that came from them, but I have not dipped into collecting them. Let's see what we've got. Are there any books in paperbacks? Levi Wallace says, are there any books in Paperbacks from Hell that you found out later weren't really in the horror genre?
Objective, right?
Yeah, that is a good one. I actually pulled one down earlier. Let's see, where is it? I've got my stacks of book here. There's a book called Such Nice People. Here we go. And so this is like a family thriller of a teenage son slowly going mad, and Valancourt is trying to get this reprinted. I don't know if it's going to happen, and I can't say for sure if it's going to happen, but it might happen. But a lot of people have been after this, and it's got kind of interesting, you know, the happy American family with the dark secret underneath. So it's in the book, and Grady writes about it and has some horrific scenes, but I wouldn't necessarily classify it as a horror novel. You know, I think there's a difference between a horror novel and a thriller. So I would say this is more of a thriller, but this is one that both Grady and I really liked, and we do hope we can get it back in print because the paperback is rare. Any books I've discovered since Paperbacks from Hell that I wish could be included? Let me see here. I can't remember if we put in, I don't think Lovers Living, Lovers Dead. I might have mentioned this in my afterword, but this is like a crazy psychosexual horror novel that I recommend. I think I mentioned it, but I don't think the cover is in there. I've got one here. I've got a couple here. Dearest by Peter Lawren and Winter Wolves by Earl Westcott. These are ones I just thought were terrific, but I read them after, I believe I read them after Paperbacks from Hell. Yeah. Yep. I read these after Paperbacks from Hell, and I've reviewed both of them on the blog. So I would definitely recommend these for two books that are not in Paperbacks from Hell.
Right. If you any fans out there of Paperbacks from Hell, go to Will's blog. It just keeps going.
Yeah. Literally Book says people are constantly saying that Necroscope should be a movie. I have only read the first one, and it was so long ago. What I remember, I don't think I loved it because it had spies, and I was like 18 or 19, and I didn't care about Russian spies or anything, and I just wanted vampires. But from what I know about the long series, what I know about it, I do think that it would make a pretty solid movie, like a good, like, you know, mini series or something. So I agree with that. Yeah. Let me should I just go through some of the covers here that I've pulled out?
Yeah,
Some of
go
the,
ahead and go ahead and show some covers.
let's
Put my
see.
notes here.
I'll do some of my favorite covers. Here's another Playboy Press Siren.
Let me make you big.
Yeah, this is just a gorgeous, gorgeous cover. This was a holy grail for a long time, and I probably got it about 2 years ago. It's in really great shape. I don't think I paid too much for it, but this is just lovely cover. Unfortunately, and it was reprinted by Tor in the late 80s. Unfortunately, with a terrible cover, and also unfortunately, the first chapter, this is the whole thing. For some reason, and anybody who's read these books knows this, incest, I don't even like saying it, was such a big deal in all these books. Obviously, V.C. Andrews, but it starts off right off the bat with a scene of incest abuse, and I'm just like, yuck. You know, I don't have any interest in that. And I don't know why it was. I guess it was such an easy shock thing, you know. So
it was in so many that I've read. I was really surprised. I was like, why does this keep coming up?
Yeah. So that was one. I'm just like, nope, I love that cover, but nah. Vampire novel Sunglasses After Dark with cover art by Mel Odom. I read this back in the day. I just love this cover. When it was reprinted like with that, but man, I just think like, you just can't beat that. Like when I was a teenager and this came out, I was like, I gotta have this. This has a famous scene of Jim Morrison coming back as a vampire in Pierre Lachaise, which I think is why I was so into it back in the day. Let's see. What booktubers do I watch regularly from Toxic Waste? Unfortunately, I've seen some of yours. I've watched Bookybus, she's here, and a couple other people, but I don't watch. I like to read my horror stuff. Like people have asked me, like, "Oh, you should do a YouTube channel." I like to write. I like to get my stuff out. Like I feel like I'm babbling when I'm talking like this. When I'm writing, I can really like drill down what I want to say.
Do you have favorite blogs? Other blogs that write about horror?
There's one, Nocturnal Revelries. He writes occult stuff, reviews of occult books, but also some horror fiction. Nocturnal Revelries, say that, and he's interviewed some horror writers, so from back in the day. Definitely that. There's the what is it, Poor Science Fiction blog. He covers science fiction stuff, but he also does cover vintage horror novels sometimes. And if you go to Too Much Horror Fiction, you'll see I've got a sidebar of book blogs that I read. Some of them are horror, some of them are crime, some of them are science fiction, but they all tend to be like the vintage era stuff like I do. Unstoppable says I was reading too much horror fiction for years before we hit back. Nice. So yeah, good to see you. Yeah, I appreciate, I had a great fan base long before Paperbacks From Hell came out, which I was just thrilled with. And here's the thing is I knew those people were out there. I knew there were other obsessives, other book obsessive, other horror obsessives. The internet and obsession are made for each other. People can drill down on like their thing. And so I was like, I know I'm not the only one, and so it's great. Yeah. All these years later to, interact with these people or people that were reading before Paperbacks From Hell is really cool.
What's your favorite Danzig song record?
Favorite Danzig song record, man. That's good. Those first 4 albums, other than a couple songs here and there, are pretty much like just impeccable. I mean, God, Her Black Wings, Little Whip on Danzig 4, I mean, just How the Gods Kill, just the title track in that video, the Geiger, the H.R. Geiger, monstrosity thing, just, Left Hand Black, Heart of the Devil. I mean, I talk about Danzig all day.
You remember when the Thrall Demon Sweat Live came out?
Yeah.
And it was like this weird half live EP.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he was famous. All of a sudden Mother was on MTV. And you're like,
it had been around for a few years already. Yeah. And suddenly everybody knew who he was. Yeah.
It was crazy.
ATOP is asking, what are the greatest werewolf horror novels? And I'm highlighting that because I'm telling you tell me, because I don't think I've read a werewolf novel that I've really enjoyed, and I don't seek them out because to me werewolves are better in a movie when you can see that those special effects. I mean, Whitley Strieber's Wolfen, they're not werewolves. They're like,
The dogs, yeah.
brilliant wolf dogs.
Have you read Quarrel with the Moon? Quarrel with the Moon is awesome.
I have that, and yeah, I've just never, the werewolf stuff has just never. So I would think other people are going to know that more than I am. That is just
what about The Howling
genre. Yeah.
Have you read The Howling?
What's that?
Have you read The Howling?
Yeah, I would say The Howling is really good. Yeah. Somebody's asking me what the best Sabbath album is and why is it Master of Reality from Secret Fire Books. I will have to defer to that because old Sabbath is from before my time. It's a funny thing. Like, to me, Sabbath is like, that's what my older relatives and the older bullies at the playground go in their Black Sabbath and, Molly Hatchet t-shirts. So I didn't listen to classic Sabbath. And now the Sabbath, if I'm going to listen to Sabbath, it's up, to be honest, it's going to be the Dio era Sabbath. That's the Sabbath that I love.
Sacrilegious, Will.
I know, but that's just, I love it.
Hey guys, thanks for showing up to the live stream.
Exactly. No, I would listen to those Sabbath albums, the classics, but the Dio Sabbath, that has that 80s metal sound, that Martin Birch production that I'm just like, yeah, I'm here for this.
Yeah, we talked about this before we started. So how many do you think you're up to?
I am up to probably between 12 and probably around 1,300. I do have an exact count somewhere in a document, so I'm probably like 1,250 maybe, just horror alone, and that's just the mass market paperbacks. That's not trade paperbacks. That's not hardcovers. That's not things like that. So there's more. Do I consider myself as much a fan as an archivist? I mean, I do consider myself an archivist. Several, I have a lot of books that are very rare. I have, some books you have 3 or 4 or in 3 or 4 editions over the years. I have a handful of like Haunting of Hill House paperbacks, or We've Always Lived in the Castle, the Shirley Jackson classics. I have a few of those. I've got Clive Barker stuff in, UK editions and the American edition. So I'm definitely like not just a fan. I'm like sort of a historian archivist as well. Yeah.
You got any summer recommendations?
Summer recommendations. The Other by Thomas Tryon. That is it's like a slow burn kind of evil twins kind of thing going on. Yeah, that's a good question. This is a good one for summer. This is like a southern, real hot and sweaty snake handling cult, The Accursed. This is really well written. One of the better written animal attack books that I found. So I definitely recommend this. Any of Michael McDowell's books from Avon from the early 80s, like The Elementals, especially, or Cold Moon Over Babylon, or The Amulet, I think would be great summer reads. That's a good question. And any of let's see. This one takes place in the winter, The Search for Jews Tully. So if like you had a real hot summer's day and you want to cool off, this book is just very wintry and doomy, and it's like there's all these weird people living in an apartment complex in Brooklyn, in an apartment building that is set for demolition. And it's just all the interactions between the characters, and then there's a supernatural background. This is a very chilly book, so this is also good for a summer read.
Yeah, I thought I had the quote written down, but in one of the reviews, you said that winter is for horror and summer is for crime. He is for crime.
Yeah, exactly right. And of course, there's always a few ones here and there. But you take A Simple Plan. So this would be a cold crime novel. By Scott Smith. They made it into a movie with Bill Paxton and Billy Bob Thornton. It's great, but that's like a chilly crime novel. So that's like, an outlier. I think that's just something I discovered through reading all these books, and you start to see these patterns and stuff. And I was like, oh, horror is like this and crime is hot. People get crazy when it's hot and they turn to crime, that kind of thing.
I think that it's also because winter is everything's dead already. So it has this kind of spooky spooky kind of thing going on where everything around you is dead. So it's already
That's right. Let's see. Disturbed Frank Tank. Is there any chance for a Paperbacks from Hell sequel? I don't think so. I really don't. I know Grady Hendrix had done some live in person Paperbacks from Hell 2. Think of the Children, where he talked about YA horror. Now I'm too old for, like, I did not read Goosebumps or anything like that. I'm way too old for that stuff. Christopher Pike, I didn't read any of that stuff. I was already in college when those books were coming out. So Grady was doing some live performances about those books, but that was on his own. There will be more books printed by Paperbacks from Hell series by Valancourt, but as far as like another coffee table book, unfortunately I don't think that's going to happen. Okay.
We're just arguing about Black Sabbath now.
Yeah. Somebody TH says about posting the recommendations on my blog later, and I can definitely do that. But also on my blog, if you go to the page where I have recommended novels, recommended short story collections, anthologies, nonfiction, you can click on that and you'll see all these books and lots more. That is something I've cultivated over. I've been doing the blog now over 15 years. So there's lots of stuff that you can find on the blog, definitely.
Stupid Levi, Sundell, man. Paperbacks from
Heaven. Well, that makes me think of like all the risque bodice ripper romance novels that were so big at the same time in the 70s and 80s. And when I worked in a used bookstore right out of college, we was all just like Harlequin romances and the big thick historical romances, and those are coming back around. I know some collectors of those books. So that's kind of what those books evoke in me, you know.
Yes, I wanted. Yeah. So, do you have a favorite short story?
Yeah, But You'll Never Follow Me. Yeah, that's a great Carl Edward Wagner. I mean, speaking of Wagner, Styx would be up there. Lovecraft, like I love all his Cthulhu mythos stuff, obviously. But I think The Rats in the Walls is just, I reread that recently, and I think that is just perfect. A lot of the Clive Barker stuff, his story In the Flesh that became, or in the collection In the Flesh, it's The Forbidden that became Candyman. That's a spectacular story. I think that's a perfect story. Stephen King, Strawberry Spring, and The Jaunt. If you don't know that, I mean, people who know what I'm talking about know the last lines in those stories will freeze your blood. I mean, those stories are just, if you know those stories, you guys out there know those stories. Those last lines are just like, that's what horror should do. You save it up for that last line, man.
When I did the Sham Blue, you commented that you really liked that the Seal more. I went and read your review, and you were like,
I did a deep dive into that one. That was a pretty integral story, and it's amazing that it was her first. I've got some good questions here. Getting some good questions here.
Let's see.
Can we scroll back some? I feel like I've missed some.
Yeah.
Horror movies that I think that are better than the book. Not really. People always mention Jaws. That's almost unfair because Jaws is the best movie ever made. So that's unfair. I feel like that's its own category. So I think generally, I agree with a lot of people. The book is usually better. Somebody mentioned Frederick Brown writes those tiny little short stories. I've got a few of his books in the collection. He always has those like little twists. You put him in a sort of he wrote crime too, but you sort of put him in a Twilight Zone sort of short little stories that just then they have that twist at the end. So yeah. Musophonic Recordings. What attracts me to other fiction outside the horror genre? The other stuff that I love are like hard-boiled crime novels. Which I feel like is such a very doodly thing to like the Jim Thompson, the James M. Cain, and the Chandlers. I've got the other paperbacks I collect. Postman Always Rings Twice from the 60s, this from the early 70s, The Big Sleep. I'm a dude. I love noir, Cornell Woolrich, stuff like that. Jim Thompson, The Grifters, the Black Lizard books. just that vibe of the doomed loser, meets the femme fatale on one last, scam they're going to run, and the cops. I love that. I just love that. So
Absolutely,
and, yeah. So these always have such a dark vibe. I think when I started reading crime, that's what appealed to me. So I'm not necessarily into mysteries, but I like either hardboiled detective or just like crime noir books, just because of that vibe. Science fiction, I like stuff like famously Harlan Ellison and Philip K. Dick and Ian Banks and some of Dan Simmons science fiction. Yeah, I just, I like an atmosphere. I like a vibe. It doesn't have to be necessarily the best written book. It doesn't have to be this, that, or the other. I just kind of read for vibes. Currently, okay, somebody likes Jaws novel. Yeah, way more gore than the movie. True. Somebody's any favorite science fiction novels that come to mind? I mean, Player of Games by Ian M. Banks would be at the top of that list. Queen of Angels by Greg Bear was one. Let's see, I'm looking right at my science fiction shelves. Obviously, one of my favorite books in my collection that's not horror is, where did I stick it? Is just here it is. This is the cyberpunk classic Neuromancer. Found this for $1 at a library sale. This goes for hundreds of dollars.
Wow,
and,
yeah.
This is minty fresh. Found it for $1. Yes, the cyberpunk stuff I like. Yeah. My favorite Peter Straub picks. Coco. I like his early one. You Should See Me Now. I like that a lot. Floating Dragon. Now his later stuff like The Throat and Mystery. Those are excellent, but those are not horror. But I have not kept. He became real prolific. So stuff he wrote in the 2000s, I was not able to catch up with. And I did have a couple interactions with him on Twitter before he died. He reposted one of my reviews that he was real happy with. So that's always very satisfying when you get that feedback from the author themselves. And
wow, yeah, that's
Peter Straub, who is one of the giants, was really like
Have you guys gotten any response from like Stephen King about the Paperbacks from Hell?
No. I know Valancourt's been in touch with Joe Hill. There was something, but no, we've not heard anything from Stephen King. No. Cork on the Ocean has got a good question. How often do you get in a reading slump where you don't feel like reading at all? I love this question because, man, it happens. You were saying that around 2017, my blog slowed down, my reviews slowed down, partly because of Paperbacks from Hell, partly because of burnout. But I was just, every horror novel I picked up, I just, didn't matter who it was by. And I was just like, I can't, either it was terrible or I just wasn't into it. So I definitely hit slumps. Right now I'm reading about 3 different books, and I don't know if I'm going to continue them. I think any big reader has that happen.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to ask. Was what do you think makes a bad book bad?
Lack of conviction, lack of narrative power, even stuff that's not well written. If you've got things moving and you have a sense of suspense and sense that you believe in the story, if you don't have that, then you don't have a good book. If you're piddling about over here while you're not writing about horror, why are you writing a horror novel? And you get into creepy, misogynist, rapey stuff. You get into really creepy, oh God, Clive Barker writes this crazy stuff, but he just has this great imagination. Other writers you're reading and you're like, this sounds off. This sounds like some weird, creepy, repressed fantasy,
Oh yeah.
And some of the Zebra books they're bad because they spend too much time writing about stuff that's not horror, and they have no narrative structure. And they concentrate on the wrong aspect of the story rather than, writing is free. So you can create any kind of monster, any kind of violence, any kind of gore tableau you want. Why are you writing about kids in a classroom in the school? I hate that. So that's what makes a bad horror book. And anybody can write one. This isn't just any one particular author. Lots of good horror writers have bad books too.
I think part of it is also the marketing department. Sometimes I think that when these authors are writing these books, they're not writing horror books. You know, they're thinking they're turning in like some thriller or some whatever.
Yeah.
And the marketing department takes in, they're like, you're a horror book. And then we buy it thinking it's horror. So then we're disappointed because it's not, you know?
That's right. Yeah, that happens. And I think that happens. That's pretty common. You know, I'm sure that still happens today. I've got some any horror cover artists that I recognize without looking it up. That's a good one. George Zeal would be the first one. He let's see. He wrote one of my favorites that Valancourt reprinted, Gwen in Green. So when I see art like that, this sort of sickly green hue and women with these big, beautiful eyes, you know, very sensuous. I'm like, that's a George Zeal. He was an interesting guy. He was a Holocaust survivor, came to New York, became an artist, did hundreds and hundreds of gothic and thriller and horror paperbacks. And we wrote about him at length in Paperbacks from Hell. So definitely when I see his books, even if I have no interest in reading it, I will buy it because of his cover art.
You have lots of articles on your blog about cover artists too.
Oh yeah, because some of them are, they're real interesting, and they did other genres. Reno Morrow is one of the great ones. Jill Bauman, lots of great people doing it. Let's see if I found any good horror parodies or satires. Somebody earlier somebody asked about Garth Marenghi. I find that stuff a little too cutesy. The Garth Marenghi thing is a little too. Is it too on the nose? Is it too I get it's kind of funny, but it's almost like I don't really like making fun of this stuff kind of thing. It's like I'm a little sensitive about it. But a good horror parody or satire. I mean, honestly, what I think is a horror parody is go back to Lovecraft's Herbert West Reanimator stories. They're almost a parody of, he's almost making fun of himself. And I remember, I'd seen Reanimator when it came out, mind totally blown, and then it was so outrageous. And I associated Lovecraft with, I don't know how much Lovecraft I'd read at that time, but not with something like Reanimator. And so when I read the Reanimator stories, I was so shocked to find that some of the funniest bits in the Reanimator movie are in the Lovecraft story, Yeah. So I would definitely say Reanimator is like a horror parody.
Didn't he not want to write that? He was.
I think that was one of his real hack work things. Yeah.
What's the scariest novel you've ever read?
Scariest novel. I mean, there's going to be no surprise. It's going to be Salem's Lot and it's going to be Pet Sematary. And I'll tell you why. Those are and I've mentioned this over the years, but those are the only two books that I have read where there was a scene and I felt like that I was in danger. Like I wasn't just spooked. I felt like I was physically, something terrible was going to happen to me. Like the scene with the Glick boy in the window, floating outside of the second story window. Just, I think is the greatest scene in horror to me is when Dracula's climbing down the side of Dracula's castle at the beginning. And I remember reading that scene terrified me. And I read that like in study hall in school when I was a teenager, that scene just in the middle of the day and I was just chill. So that to me is the greatest scene in horror. The second greatest is that scene from Salem's Lot, the little boys outside the window. And then in Pet Sematary, when Judd is telling the story about, was it Timmy Baterman? And he's relating the story about how Timmy Baterman comes back from the war, his body comes back and his father buries him in the Pet Sematary and he comes back. And that level of the storytelling in the story just froze me to my chair. Yeah. So yeah, Salem's Lot, Pet Sematary. Let's see. Kids ruin all hard. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. Did sales of Paperbacks from Hell blow away expectations for everyone involved? Great. Yeah. I don't know what the sales are, but I know it went into more printings because we had a very, very tight deadline. And there were some mistakes that got in there, some proofreading things. We sort of got the wrong author with the wrong title book and the wrong year said 1987 instead of 1978. And people would hammer us on this in Goodread reviews or Amazon reviews. And it's like, dude, have you ever tried to get a book published? Grady is like reading 5 or 6 books a day. I'm scanning like all the hundreds of book covers. And they're like, we need this, within 10 days. And it's just like, man, you don't know what you're talking about. But Those got fixed in subsequent printings, so I know it's still a seller. It is still being printed, and it really did kind of blow us away. But I'll tell you, when I saw the book, when I got it, like a month or two before it actually came out, I was like, oh, it exceeded all my expectations. I was like, this is incredible, and I had a feeling like this is going to be big. This is going to be big. And then we won the Bram Stoker Award. So yeah, that was amazing. So yeah, it did kind of become a surprise, but also when I saw it, I was like, yeah, this is real. This is awesome. Yeah.
That's why I was surprised when I looked at the blog, and when you look at the years in 2017, you just kind of really start dropping down.
I did.
Entries. I figured it would be the opposite, where you'd be all hyped afterwards.
I know. It just I don't know what it was. It was just, I think I had been doing it for so long, and I had all these great all these books and reviews, and then maybe I had read so many good books, and all the ones that I was reading after that, I had sort of exhausted the supply. And it's like I said, I started like not finishing books because I just didn't think they were any good. And I'm not going to write a review about a book that I only read half of. I'll write a bad review. But I did start doing more on Twitter back then and engaging with people through Twitter and Instagram. But as far as doing like full length book reviews, I definitely slowed down. And that was just, reading exhaustion. Somebody's talking about the Amityville horror. Some years back, I worked in a small office, and our IT guy had been born and grew up in Amityville. And what was so funny is, of course, we all had to ask him. They're like, not that we asked him, like, is it true? But we were like, what's the deal with the Amityville horror? And he was like, everybody there hates it. Everybody knows it's all a scam. Yeah. It's a regular house on a regular street. Other houses look like that house on that street. You can just go to Google Street View. They've changed that house, but other houses have those windows, those windows that look like eyes. He's like, they hate it because all the tourists are brought jamming up this regular residential street. It was a scam, and it overshadows the real horror of the murders of the DeFeo family, which I think that's immoral. I'm not crazy about that kind of thing.
Yeah, exploitation of the true crime.
Of real yeah, that to me is not horror. I get, why it became such a big thing. And it was very scary as a kid, and that book is pretty scary. If you think about it like a horror novel, there's some scary stuff in it. But yeah, that was interesting. That dude was just like, no, everybody hates it. Everybody knows it's fake.
Let's see.
Oh, Paperbacks from Hell tarot deck. Oh my God. I love that.
Bob,
I love that. I'm gonna make a note of that. My wife is a tarot deck collector, and I'm gonna mention that. That is a really cool idea. All right. Yeah.
All right. Cool. So, are we caught up here?
Let me
questions.
Let me do a couple more book covers and book recommendations here.
Yeah, I also wanted to talk about your the introductions that you've written for these books, that the reprints and stuff.
Yeah, the Valancourt books. Yeah, we I think we're at 19, and I think we want to do 3 more. I think we're going to wrap it up, unfortunately. And that was something that Valancourt Books, I had been in touch with them over the years, where they were reprinting some Michael McDowell's and some other horror novels, and they would get in touch with me. And there was like one case, they're like, our copy of The Elementals is missing 2 pages. Will you scan them? And so I was always helping them with these books before Paperbacks from Hell. So I had a relationship with them. So then when Paperbacks from Hell came out and got super popular, they approached me and Grady and were like, we want to get the rights to Paperbacks from Hell to reprint some of these paperbacks. Are you guys into that? Or you guys will write the introductions. And we're like, that's how do we not think of that? So yeah, we started that in 2019. Started off with The Nest and Nightblood, The Auctioneer. I don't remember exactly what order they're in, but yeah, and it's tricky to get all 3 of us, the publishers and Grady and me, on the same page about a book, because you know, they don't want anything that's, you know, some of these books are dated, like I was talking about, the incest and rape and like sexualized violence and stuff in a way that comes off as very, it's a funny thing. It's like the John Waters thing about good taste and there's bad taste and there's good bad taste, and threading that line. And so we didn't want anything that's bad taste. So it was tricky then to get the rights. Some people don't care about these books that they wrote 40 years ago. Some people just have disappeared off the face of the earth, but you still don't want to take a chance on reprinting the book because if Valancourt is an indie publisher, just put them out of business if they get sued. So that's an issue. But we do think that I think we're going to do 3 more books, and I think we've sort of done all the ones that we want to do. There were some we wanted to do and we couldn't do. People turned us down. So there's many moving parts to getting these books reprinted. Yeah,
I talked to Justin from Fathom Press about it sometimes.
Yeah, and he's doing a good job. Yeah, somebody's got what roadblocks were there in using so many different book covers in Paperbacks from Hell. There weren't too many that I know of. There were 1 or 2, I think, that was maybe we were unsure about a copyright or something, but not too many. Grady said that he will occasionally get an email from an artist saying, "Oh, you know, it's not credited in the book," and they say, "That's actually my artwork." And I'm like, "What do they want?" And he's like, "Usually just write them a check." Like they just like, you know, for, I don't know, you know, I don't want to count somebody else's money, but he's like, they're not mad. They're just Grady's like, "Oh, you know, throw a couple bucks your way or whatever." You know?
Yeah, they're probably excited.
Yeah, they have been. Grady's done some panels with the artists, so a lot of these people like, man, I haven't thought about that book cover in 40 years. So there weren't really, people were happy to have this stuff put back out there.
I think that the artists for those horror books in that era, they are unknown. Yeah. Many of them. I wanted to go start a t-shirt company of old horror books, right? And I messaged Zebra and I messaged Avon, and I'm like, well, who did this cover? They're like, we have no idea who
That's
did
the other
this
thing. There's just no idea. Here's a good question about the rights to Eat Them Alive by Pierce Nace, which I did pull down, and let me see if I can find it so everybody can see the cover. We do know who Pierce Nace is now. She was a woman from Texas who had been a writer, like an advice columnist. You can Google this. There are several articles about it. They did track her down. The Vault of Horror page, I think somebody there tracked her down. And she was like an old lady when she wrote this book. Where is my copy of it? Here it is. So this is one of the, this is one of the rarest horror paperbacks. This is the UK version that I bought for like $5 some years ago. It cost more to ship it from England than the book itself. Total score. The US version is harder to find. So nobody alive, nobody that was involved in this book is alive. The publisher, nobody knows. That said, this book sort of veers on the side of bad taste in a way that none of us are like, do we want to put this back out there? It's like kind of yes, but kind of no, because it is super duper rapey and sexually violent. And that is something that we're like this book is totally deranged. It's totally ridiculous. It's totally stupid. It is readable. That's the thing, is like it keeps going, but it's like, I don't know what this lady was thinking. She read it, but it's crazy. But there's just, say we did reprint it, somebody's going to, come out of the woodwork and go, oh, I was involved with this book, and it could put Valancourt Books out of business. So unfortunately, it will not be reprinted.
Why do you think some of the authors' families don't want their work reprinted?
I know in the case of the writer Brian Keene told me he knew J.N. Williamson, who wrote a lot for Leisure and Zebra and different publishers, and he was also a mentor to young horror writers and wrote put together some anthologies for young horror writers who were people like Joe Lansdale, who later became famous. And so he was great to up and coming horror writers, but his books are just not good. He has that, he reads like he's a autodidact, where he just is like relating the encyclopedia article he just read, which is very wooden and dull. But apparently what Brian Keene told me is he went to his funeral, and his family is born again Christian, extremely religious, so they did not want to acknowledge his horror fiction at all, because it was against their religion, they felt. So, and sometimes some people, I think somebody had like a bad relationship with the parent, who was dead and just wanted to just forget them. So there's so many different reasons why we can't reprint books, all the different reasons you could imagine. Yeah, everybody gets eaten and eat them alive. They really do. Goblin Gaxinator, the Jaws cover rewrote the book on reprint rights. Yeah, the interesting, do I understand that question before? Jaws cover reprints were rarely, yeah. The Jaws artwork for the paperback became the movie poster. That I don't think that had really happened before. He created that for the paperback. They didn't use the hardcover image, and then now it's the iconic movie poster. So that was a new thing back in that day. That's another reason Jaws is historic.
Yeah, it's
but I want to show a couple other women. Horror is in a way a woman genre. Grady talks about so many women write horror and know horror and live it, unfortunately, and they write it and just it's just amazing. I mean, obviously the big one, Kathy Koch's The Cipher. This is one of the rare Del Abyss books. I bought this when it came out, 1991. It's all beat up. I read it a bunch. Kathy Koch is amazing. All her early books are great. I've never gotten to meet her. I've chatted with her a lot online, but we've never been able to be at like the same convention at the same time. And of course, Shirley Jackson, all her stuff is amazing. But here's some lesser known ones. Burning by Jane Chambers. She was a playwright, a lesbian playwright, and known in her community back in the 70s. This is her only novel, and it's got a super lurid cover by Rowena Marl, which I absolutely love. One of my top very favorites. It compares it to Salem's Lot and The Omen, I think, which is not true at all, but it's sort of a witchy, haunting book about two women and their past lives together. So it's light horror. It's more of a gothic kind of, not a romance, but it's got some good creepiness in it. Amy Come Home by Barbara Michaels. She wrote a lot of sort of gothic romances. This takes place in Washington, D.C. in the late 60s. Great slice of life. Great, there's a Georgetown building that's haunted. Great cover by the great Harry Bennett, who did lots of crime covers. The spooky possessed girl. This is really dated in a funny way. You read these old books and it's like, oh, the professor's dating the students and all that kind of stuff. Stuff that just doesn't apply today. I love reading it because it's just such a snapshot of what people thought was just totally normal and totally fine. And it's just, to me, it's just, that just gives me this great peek into the past. The Landlady by Constance Rauch. I don't know anything about this author. This is a creepy cover scene, and this is in the book. This is in the story. Just I would compare sort of to Rosemary's Baby a little bit. There's an apartment building, secret passageway, and stuff like that. So this was a good creepy read for this would be a good summer read. Somebody earlier asked about vampire books, I believe. Les Daniels, he wrote a whole series of vampire books. I think this was my favorite, No Blood Spilled. It takes place in India in the 19th century and deals with the Thuggee cult, which everybody remembers from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This guy can write. This guy has a lot of fun. He has a lot of fun writing about horror. He wrote about comic books back in the day. He wrote about the history of horror fiction before Stephen King. This guy knows what he's doing. He died a few years ago, but the series is good. This was my favorite.
It's historical too.
Yeah. All his stuff was the vampires through different eras of history, and kind of the point is how the vampires often the least evil of the characters in the story. Right.
Yeah, I read the one. I forget what it's called, but it's like the Spanish Inquisition one.
Yeah, maybe that was the Black Castle. That was one of the early ones. Yeah. Somebody said, "What's the sleaziest horror novel?" That would be Eat Them Alive, or what I did earlier, Flesheaters. Flesheaters is better written. Flesheaters is a real book, but as far as real sleaze, it is definitely the Pierce Nice book, which is so funny, but it is.
I like those written by an old lady too. It's even better.
Yeah. Yep. What's the ratio of relevant book covers to irrelevant? Man, it's 50-50. It's a crapshoot. You never know. You know, a lot of times the artist didn't read the book. That wasn't part of the assignment. But then sometimes they did, and they'll take a little bit, you know, and put it on the cover. So it's kind of, you never know with the book covers. Would I never read a hard book ever again for 250? Probably less than that, you know. the ones that, I mean, like we're talking about book exhaustion, book burnout. Lately, I have not been having good luck, you know, because I have so many, like I said, and I was just like, all right, I'll try this, and you know, and I know Grady had the same problem when we were putting together Paperbacks from Hell. Is like, oh, I read 20 pages and I know exactly where the book is going, and we just toss it aside, you know.
So yeah, so many from that era are they're not good.
No. Have I read Voice in the Clown from PBO Fan? I haven't read it. I've seen a copy of it in person in a bookstore in Las Vegas for $400. I posted it the other day. It was in a plastic baggie. It was not behind the counter. $400. I feel so bad that this is the unintended consequence of my blog and Paperbacks from Hell. So I can't say whether or not it's the most shocking. I will say, I'll clarify, Grady has said that the book itself is okay, but there are a couple scenes in there that he said just blew him out of the water. I told him, don't tell me in case I ever read it. So I have read reviews, like skimmed reviews of other people who've read it, and they're like, yeah, it's not very good, but there are a couple scenes in there. We tried to get that reprinted by Valancourt. That totally, the author had died. Valancourt dealt with her son, and he just didn't seem like he cared. So unfortunately, that's not going to get reprinted either, seems like. Trigger warnings in horror extreme novels. In the book I just did, new book I just did an interview or introduction for. This is an old friend of mine from Raleigh who put this together, Claw Machine, and it's speculative fiction stories. This just came out, and you can order this online, and it's short stories based on Claw Machine. So some of it's science fiction, some of it's horror, some of it's dark fantasy, but it has a little bit of a note from the editor where it just says there's no sexual assault or animal deaths. I know animal death is a big thing, particularly after people become pet owners. I only recently got cats within the last couple years, and now I totally understand people not wanting to experience that in their book. So a little introductory prefatory note like that, I think, is okay. But I find sometimes ratings, trigger warnings to be almost like to be spoilers in a way. But and your taste changes as you get older, you get more sensitive about things. So you know, I'm certainly not against trigger warnings, but it's not something that I myself demand in what I read. Yeah, the Skeleton Cheerleader book that was Lydia's Book's a Tear. The book that was there another book that had a skeleton cheerleader? I know there was a movie that has the skeleton cheerleader, but I don't know of another book that has a skeleton cheerleader on it. Oh, I don't know what that is.
It's the zebra one, isn't it?
Was there another one? Could be a zebra one.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called. I can see it in my head because it has the black background, like
all the zebras. Yeah. I'm totally drawing a blank on that. I mean, I would love to have more zebra books in my collection. People were asking earlier about Holy Grails. There are a few. There's Runaway by Stephen Gresham. I've got a bunch of his books. They all have the great zebra skeleton cover, and that one has the skeleton with like he's in a gingerbread house or something. And you know, and it's just out of my price range. But I would say that was a Holy Grail. You know. Somebody's asking literary books, favorite monster and weirdest monster. Oh, that's a good one. I mean, you know, Jaws and Dracula are my favorite, Dracula is probably my favorite fictional character. I will watch any kind of, I love any kind of Dracula adaptation. I love how they you know, there's no one great Dracula movie adaptation. You know, you can sort of Frankenstein one together by taking parts from every Dracula movie and putting them together. So I love any kind of representation of Dracula. Jaws, of course. Bruce the Shark, amazing. Weirdest monster would probably have to be something out of a Clive Barker story, maybe a Magica, or one of the stories from the Books of Blood, the in the hills, the cities, with all the people gathered up and the giants, or the Skins of the Fathers. There's like a procession, like a parade procession across the desert of these crazy monsters that Clive Barker describes in the only way he can. So I would say those are my favorites.
You keep mentioning vampire stories. Is that like one of your favorite? That's one of your favorite subgenres.
I do like good vampire stuff. I don't, I read all the Anne Rice stuff back in the day, and I enjoyed that. But I also like sleazier ones or more graphic ones. Something actually, I pull one aside. Here's one from Leisure Books. I reviewed this on the blog some years ago. Lifeblood by Lee Wiegand. He wrote a couple books for Pinnacle, not Leisure. It's Pinnacle. Cool cover with a bat. This has a fat vampire. Is the main vampire, and he has a human assistant who was this really cranky woman. I think she was a nurse. It's been some years since I read it, and she's sort of throughout the book getting frustrated with the things he's making her do, and kind of wants to get revenge. She's like his little Renfield kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
And so the book's pretty well, it's well written. It's not great, but it just has a couple twists in it and has a nice twist at the end. And I reviewed it, and this author commented on it. But I think he's got Lifeblood and then Schoolhouse, which is another great skeleton cover, but I haven't gotten around to that one. But for a lesser known vampire novel, I would say definitely Lifeblood. What is the most common, most annoying misconception about vintage horror? Oh boy, that's good. Well, that it's all crap. Like I was saying earlier about people hate horror. I think that people automatically think all horror is Freddy or Jason. I know Charles L. Grant back in the day would complain when people ask, "Oh, what do you write?" And I write horror, and they think immediately he just writes slashers. And so I think that people who don't understand horror think it's all just psycho ripoffs, Friday the 13th, or monster movies. And horror can be anything. Horror can be in any style book. Horror can be in a book that's not horror. On the Spine, you can have all different layers and types of horror is everywhere. So the misconception, I think, is that it's just this one thing, that these are just old, crappy books that nobody cares about anymore, but that's not true. So I think that's the biggest misconception. Yeah, Dracula Dead and Loving It. Yeah, that's God love Leslie Nielsen. I mean, him standing up and smacking his head, and I mean that's just classic. Or the staking and all the ridiculous amount of blood. I mean that's hilarious. Secret Fire. Who would win, Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers? Boy, that is a tough one. That is a tough one because, I mean, they both have become, Michael Myers started out as a regular person. Jason was always a supernatural creature, so boy, I don't know what bet I would take on that. Oh, somebody's asking, I won't sell a book even if I don't like it. Yeah, that's absolutely Cork in the Ocean S. Hey, kitty, this is Hildy. Hey, sweetie. Hello. I knew she'd probably show up. I don't have a door on my library, so. But anyway, I absolutely collect books by authors I don't actively dislike. And if you read my blog, you know who they are, or authors I'm really not interested in. I collect for archival reasons. I have stacks of books by. It's fine. I have stacks of books by people I'm not that big a fan of. I think I've only gotten rid of, a small handful of books that I really didn't like, didn't care about the cover, or was in terrible condition. And I probably I either sold it or I'm in Portland. We have a lot of those little free libraries in front of people's houses. And I probably stuck it in one of those.
Cat's playing with the lights.
Yeah. Hey, sweetie. Let's see. Um, uh, yeah. And Andre Norton, that's science fiction. I don't have any of their books. You don't have any of their books, actually. So
That's crazy.
I know who that is, but yeah, none.
Wow, book collector with no Andre Nortons. Guys, we need to start sending them. We need to start sending Andre Nortons to Will.
Well, it's like because there's so many of them in any used bookstore. Same thing in crime, like John D. McDonald, like just dozens and dozens of these books. So yeah, I have a lot of John D. McDonald, but I don't have any Andre Nortons. Kitty, where you at? Oh boy. Oh my goodness. I've never seen you get up in there. Oh my goodness. Kitty. Yes. Look at her. You're okay. You're okay.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, I got you.
All right. I've never seen her. She's looking for attention. Never seen her do that. Thanks. Somebody commented that she's not going to. Thank you. That's awesome. Favorite witch history. Oh boy, I can't say that I've read.
Witch
well,
story.
okay. No, Witch History is the book I showed earlier, The Burning, because that's why the Burning. It's I was about to say I don't know. No, this one, because the women in the past were witches. So it takes place in the 70s, but suddenly there's all this stuff that's happening in the past, these repressed memories kind of thing, and they were lovers in the past. So of course they're going to be burned as witches because they were lesbian lovers. It's that kind of story. It's awesome. Yeah. Do any relatives read horror fiction or genre fiction? Yeah. My mom read all this stuff when I was growing up. I had an aunt who read it. But not a whole lot. I had friends in high school, a very small group of friends, and we would trade around Clive Barker books. Rex Miller's Slob, I remember. James Herbert, The Fog, that was a big one when we were teenagers. But my mom is a big reader, but I don't think she reads a lot of horror, but she read Stephen King stuff back in the day. Favorite cat attack story from Literally Books. That is a good one. That is a good one. Let's see. And it is right here. It is Feral by Burton Rouchet. This has been in print in several different editions. It's very thin. Stephen King mentions this in Danse Macabre, which is why I read it. And this author, he wrote, Burton Rouchet, he wrote medical stories that were the basis for the TV show House. What a weird connection, But this is a short little animal attacks video of a bunch of cats going ape shit, and some of the scenes of them describing like the cat claws jumping on people and climbing up their back. And I read this even before I had cats, and I could just feel it. Which is weird because on Goodreads, this book has a lot of bad reviews. And I'm like, I don't know what you were expecting from this book, but this is a quick read. There's another book called The Cats by Nick Sharman, which I read recently. And I like that just okay, but that was that author's first novel. And you can tell it's a first novel. He got better later. But for a cat attack,
I have a question about Feral, because I've owned it for years and I haven't read it because I didn't want to hear about cats being killed. Does that happen in Feral?
Yeah, they have to at the end because, like I said, I read it before I had cats. But what I really remember more is I think when you get to that point, you're like, oh my God, these are terrifying. You sort of detach from that. It's kind of like a shark lover. You get to the end of the Jaws, and you're like, he's got to go, man. Let's see. Okay, yeah, Floating Dragon. Somebody says the only book they can finish. Yeah, Floating Dragon, I think, is excellent. And almost all the books I pulled up are very expensive. Yeah. Some people have a problem reading Straub. I don't, people's tastes are different and stuff, but Floating Dragon is really interesting because it has some similarities to It before it came out. Sorry, Infinite Text about very expensive on the internet. Like I said, mea culpa with Paperbacks from Hell on the blog. Some of these books were expensive before then, and I just happened to luck into them. Don't give up. keep looking all the places I was saying, and you can find these books for cheap. No, Stellar Stop Motion. I have not watched the show Supernatural. Somebody's talking about Guyan Smith. And I've got a handful of his books. I read one of his recently, Bats Out of Hell, that I liked a lot. The Slime Beast I would love to have. The Sucking Pit is another Guyan Smith I would like to have. I've only read one of his crab books, Killer Crab. I thought that was okay. I thought he could have done more with it, but I thought Bats Out of Hell was pretty good.
I've read The Sucking Pit. It's awesome.
Okay. Yeah, he has a style, he is super prolific, and I think Valancourt tried to reprint some of his stuff, but the family, it was after he died, and the family said that they were going with other options to reprint all of his stuff. So who knows with that? I thought it would be pretty cool to get him on the Valancourt reprint list, but that won't happen. Yeah, I've read a good book by Stella McKay. I don't know that book. No, I don't know if that's a horror novel. It doesn't sound familiar.
Oh, there it is.
No, I don't know what that is.
Supernatural Scooby Cross.
No. But yeah, let me show. Oh, here's a good bonkers book from Del Abyss from the early 90s, The Orpheus Process by Daniel H. Gower. This book is just nuts. And it's the kind of thing, like, it'd be a worse book if it were better written. The fact that it's reads kind of amateurish in places, it's so ridiculous. This guy's reanimating monkeys and reanimating his dead daughter who gets killed in a shooting. I mean, it's just bonkers. So if you want, like, it's not really, I wouldn't say it's sleazy, but it's like a really pretentious, crazy horror novel. So I definitely recommend this one.
Do those the Del Abyss line books that you have, those from, have you owned those since they came out?
A few of them. I had a mass die off of books in the late 90s, living in a crappy apartment or a crappy like duplex, and the basement flooded during one of the Carolina hurricanes, and my bookshelves fell over. So I lost a lot of paperbacks that I had since I was a teenager. And over the years, I started having to rebuy them. So some of the Del Abyss books I've had since then, and some of them I've had to buy since then.
All right, still talking about Supernatural.
Let's see. Oh, another big 80s badass horror novel, Son of the Endless Night, John Farris. I got a big review of this. This I read a few times. This has got the great, I haven't done any step back cover art. I believe John Milo was the artist for this. He was real good at doing clothing texture and hair and stuff. And this is Great Winged Demon, which is awesome. This is just a blast. I highly recommend this. This guy can write. This guy, you read him and it's like he's a real person who's experienced real life. A lot of horror writers, because it was such a prolific during the horror paperback boom, it attracted so many bad writers who didn't know how to write about anything about life. So they were just making stuff up. That's why the dialogue's terrible. That's why the sex scenes are terrible. That's, and he's got believable characters of all different social strata. There's a wrestler in here. I've never read a horror novel where a wrestler was a character, a pro wrestler. So highly recommended.
Didn't you, I think you said the same about All Heads Turn that he wrote, didn't you?
Yeah, that's a good one too. And I read that in high school. That was one of the first books that I reread when I started too much horror fiction, and I was just like, this is exactly the kind of thing I want to do. Reread a book I sort of forgot about from high school, reread it, and then it be great and turn other people onto it who maybe wouldn't have known about it otherwise, or like, oh, I do remember this book, but it didn't look like it'd be any good. That was the kind of thing that was my impetus for too much horror fiction, was getting, finding out like, oh no, these books, the misconception is wrong, that these are just terrible, crappy books. These are great books.
That reminds me of one of the aspects of your blog where you you ask the questions. Like, I thought I had it written down. What's the title of the series?
Oh, Horror Fiction Help. If people are looking for forgotten books, they can only remember the cover, they can only remember the author's name or they can't remember anything but one scene. A lot of times I know the book, but when I post it on the blog, it's because I don't know it. And I get my readers to help figure out what it is. And I put a lot of people back in contact with books that they read when they were a child. So that's really satisfying.
Yeah, it was really
if you've got a book you can't remember, you can email me toomuchhorrorfiction@gmail. Excuse me, and maybe I can figure it out or put it out there so other people could know it.
It was really cool to get. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, somebody's asking about Lost Futures by Lisa Tuttle, weird novel. Grady loves that book, and we were thinking about doing it for Paperbacks from Hell reprints, but we already have 2 Lisa Tuttles. It's also a long book, and long books are just too expensive to reprint, unfortunately. I think they like to keep them under 250 pages, but I do have it, and it is on my to be read list. Mary Spencer says, read Way Too Young Charnel House by Graham Masterson. That's one of my favorite Graham Masterson books. House is Possessed. Definitely recommend that. That is, let's see, I've got that. Oh, where is it? Oh, there it is. Sorry. Looking at my butt on there.
No, it's
Charnel House. Yeah. He does a lot of this has Native American mythology mixed in with some Lovecraft stuff. His books can get ridiculously violent in a very like what you're like, oh, this is awesome kind of thing. So he'll have a little bit of Lovecraft, but then he'll amp it up. So Graham Masterson is one of the greats from the 70s and 80s. And still right now, super prolific.
What do you think of T.M. Wright?
I'm actually reading a T.M. Wright right now. I am reading The Woman Next Door. I'm just a few chapters in. I'm digging it. I've reviewed a couple of his books on the blog over the years. I wasn't crazy about, but he's got a lot of books with good covers, so I do collect them. And like I said, I'm a couple chapters into The Woman Next Door, and I'm digging it. So The Last Vampire, I don't have that one, but thanks for the tip. Do authors send me arcs that I don't want? No, I haven't had that. But I have gotten some publishers have sent me, like Penguin sent me a bunch when they reprinted Thomas Ligotti and Shirley Jackson. They just we thought somebody found me and were like, here, you like these books. And I've had people who were reducing their collection who just sent me a box of old paperbacks, of old horror paperbacks. And sometimes it's a lot of stuff I've already got. This is a few years back. Several people did that, but I've definitely added some stuff to my collection because of that. So yeah, that's something. Wow. Thank you. Well, somebody was disappointed by the Manitou. Oh, that's surprising because I love that one. But definitely read more Masterton. If that was his first book. I loved it. I had not read him before, and it just kind of was like, oh, didn't know what to expect, and I thought it was great. But yeah, I would pick another one.
What are your thoughts on Sean Hudson?
The only one I read Slugs, and it was just like, it's just too much like a James Herbert. I collect his books because his covers are cool, and he seems like a cool dude, but they're very formulaic and just it's not exactly my thing too much. Worst paperback from hell from Dirty Huggy is Rockabye Baby. I did read Rockabye Baby, and it is one of those books that doesn't know where its strengths in. It's not a good book. It has an interesting psycho character in it, but the guy spends all the time writing about this obnoxious little kid named Prince. And I've reviewed it on the blog, and it's like this guy didn't know what the best part of his book was. It was, again, what makes a book bad? An author not knowing what the good stuff is. Write about this psycho you created that's on the cover of the book. I don't care about some little kid named Prince in going about his school day. Like,
yeah.
What?
Yes.
That's a good one. Any authors I disliked at first but learned to love? Oh, that's a good question, but I'm trying. Let me think about who I don't know. I've been pretty lucky with it really hasn't really happened. Like the people I dislike, I kind of stay disliking them, and I'll read more books by them, thinking it'll change, and then no. I did read Mephisto Waltz recently, and I was not too crazy with it. That read like a kind of book written by an author who is getting in on the horror craze after Rosemary's Baby, and somebody who doesn't really have any. This is why so many 70s and 80s horror books were bad, is because it was a publishing phenomenon, but a lot of these writers had no love or affection or feel or knowledge or understanding of horror. You know, they didn't grow up reading it, and they were just writing it because the publisher and the marketing department was like, "You got to write this because this is what sells. Write a scary book," and they're like, "Oh, okay," you know, and that's why a lot of them are bad, and that's what Mephisto Waltz sort of felt like to me, is that it was just in the wake of Rosemary's Baby. Yeah. Oh yeah, John Tiggs books From Below. Yeah. Now his stuff From Below, I think, is that one he wrote under William Essex. His stuff is getting tough to find, and they all have good covers. But yeah, there's a lot of copycat stuff in the genre. There always has been. There really has. Stephen King, broke the mold, so everybody was copying him. And it's just like in movies how Tarantino takes all the stuff from the past, like Stephen King takes Dracula, moves in small town America, and then what happens is that people, Dracula, or Stephen King takes Dracula, puts him in a small town, but what writers after him is they just take Salem's Lot and rip off Salem's Lot. It's like Tarantino goes back, copies old movies, does it his way, but the people, they don't copy the old movies, they copy Tarantino. So now you get a copy of a copy, and it just gets worse and worse. It's a bad Xerox, and that's what makes a lot of that era so bad, and why sometimes I get in a slump because of that. Yeah, somebody's asking me, still not a fan of Richard Lehman. I am not. I still collect his books because they're collectible. A lot of them have good covers. But I'm not saying I won't read another one, but every single one I've read has just been a complete letdown. And I know that sort of puts me in a minority, but there are other people who, feel the same way as I do, but I know he's huge and he has all his fans and stuff, and his books are still in print. But yeah, I have not gotten on that train. Any tropes I won't read. You see a cover and say a big note. Like I was saying, like the thing with the incest stuff in these books is you don't know it until it's happening.
Right.
Because these books,
yeah, it's not selling it on the cover.
Yeah, they're not going to put that on the cover. So, but not really. I'll sort of read anything, and if it comes up, like I said, there's good bad taste and bad taste, and so I can read a rape scene or an animal death scene or something if it's handled in a way that doesn't seem cheap and sleazy. You know what I'm saying? I can do that. So there's not necessarily stuff I avoid, but if I know there's going to be an incest scene, it's just stuff just like it's such a cheap way of shock.
It is. It's bad.
I love this. Tarantino drags old actors out of retirement, makes them stars again. Yeah, this has nothing to do with horror, but some years back I was talking to some younger people about Pulp Fiction, and they all loved it, but none of them understood that half the pleasure of Pulp Fiction when it came out was watching John Travolta become a star again. They did not know that John Travolta had been one of the uncoolest dudes on the planet for the whole 80s, and watching him, like Tarantino was like, "You're a star," and watching that was so much fun. And I was like, "You guys are missing the best part about Pulp Fiction is John Travolta becoming a star again."
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah,
he did the Talking Baby movies.
That's right. That was what he had done, and then he did Get Shorty after that. Yeah. Yeah. John Shirley. Asked me about John Shirley. Sellers, his early book. I think it's his first horror novel, but not his first book. He wrote science fiction before that. Sellers is a great proto splatterpunk, New York City, grimy vibe. Yeah, and some of his short stories are really good. So I'll definitely say my favorite is Sellers by John Shirley. Yeah, that's a good one.
All right.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean we're around 2 hours here.
Yeah. I think we covered. Let me say, I pointed out some books that I wanted to point out. And yeah, so people, go to the blog and go to the page where I have recommended, reads and stuff, and you find the books I showed here and a lot more. I've got 15 years of book reviews and cover art and whatnot on there, and yeah, it's slowed down some, but I'm still, I'm still got, articles that I'm working on bit by bit. So yeah, and there will be more Paperbacks from Hell coming out as soon as we decide which books we want to do. Yeah, somebody didn't like the Slob novels by Rex Miller. Slob was big when I was a teenager, but when I reread it for the blog, I did not like it. So, and he has a story in the Splatterpunks book, which was a great anthology for 1990, but his story is hands down the worst. So I would agree there. Sorry you got them all and hated them all, but yeah, I would agree with that.
Awesome.
This was awesome. Wow. Yeah, I just talk about this stuff for hours. We're glad everybody showed up.
Everyone.
Great questions and stuff. And yeah, so I don't do Twitter or X or whatever. I don't do that anymore, but I'm on Instagram under my name, and I post a lot of the books that I find, and then links like if I do a new review. And my Facebook, Too Much Horror Fiction blog has a Facebook page, and there's a great page that I belong to, the Retro Horror Paperbacks on Facebook. That's super popular. That we've talked on there. So doing the Lord's work, yeah, because he's not going to do it.
Not till Paperbacks from Heaven comes out.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, Nick, this was great, man. I really appreciate you asking me to do this. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, definitely.
It was amazing.
All right, guys. I'm going to go have a drink and enjoy the rest of this 4th of July weekend. And yeah, hope to see you guys online. All right, Nick?
All right, cool. All right.
Have a good one, man. Thank you.
Bye.